right. Well, hello, everybody. Hi. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate you guys coming out, and I recognize some faces in here. So how many of you came 2 years ago? I had a talk for New England Desserts. Okay, I was like, yeah. So thank you for coming back for my third book, New England Brunch. So my name is Tammy Donroe Inman, if you haven't met me before. I'm a local author. I live in Waltham. Hanson Public Library invited me to come 2 years ago, and Karen Stolfer invited me to come this time. And I want to also thank Rob at Whitman Hanson Public Access. He's going to record this talk for everybody to watch. So thank you. So a little about me. I am a New England girl. I was born in Maine. I grew up in New Hampshire. I've lived in the Boston area basically my entire life, save like 5 years in DC. So I really love the seasons, and my cookbooks are all built around the seasons in one way or another. But these two books are really special because they're specifically New England. And so it kind of takes you on a tour of the seasons, obviously starting in spring, summer, fall, winter, and then there's usually some other chapter at the end that celebrates something special. In New England Desserts, it was ice cream, because ice cream is always in season. Doesn't matter what time of year, we will always have a bowl of ice cream. For New England Brunch, there is another special chapter in the back that we'll talk about in a little while. But first, I wanted to give you a little bit about my background, and then we're going to talk about brunch, which is, I assume, why you came here. So I went to culinary school after college. And I spent some time in the test kitchen of Cook's Illustrated magazine in Brookline at the time. Now it's in Boston. And it happened to be the very first season of America's Test Kitchen that they were filming. And so nobody knew that it was going to end up being like a big surprise hit. Everybody was kind of making things up as they went along. We had some sort of special guests come unexpectedly, which some of you might remember the story of how Julia Child just showed up one day and nobody knew she was coming, and I almost ran into her with a hot sheet pan full of chocolate chip cookies. Couldn't believe my eyes. After that, I worked as an editor for Boston Magazine, written for Boston Globe, for Yankee, like all the local magazines and newspapers. And I wrote a blog for 10 years about cooking locally, feeding kids, or trying to feed kids. Now they're all in college. So I started writing cookbooks, and I also work as a cheesemonger at Formaggio Kitchen in Boston. If anybody's ever been to the Formaggio Kitchen cheese shops, they're pretty amazing if you ever get a chance. Hundreds of cheeses. Amazing. So let's talk about brunch. So why did I write a book about brunch? Well, I have a huge sweet tooth, obviously. My first cookbook was Winter Sweet. It was all about desserts in the wintertime, like really sort of cozy, simple desserts. New England Desserts was similarly all about desserts in all seasons. Brunch tends to be a lot of sweet items, but what I like about it, well, there's many things I like about it, is that it can be a combination, obviously, of brunch and lunch, so you don't have to just have sweet things. You can have vegetables, you can have soups, you can have sandwiches, but there is a very large sweet component, and so, of course, that's where my heart is. The other part of it is that I am not a morning person at all. I don't rise on the weekends, honestly, before 10. And my family loves it because it's all boys. They want to play their video games uninterrupted. And when mom's sleeping, nobody's hassling them about it. So it has actually worked out really well in my life. I get my sleep, they get their video games, I'm up, video games go away. So anyways, so let's talk about, that is not my slideshow. All right. That's my work. All right, let's see. Let's get that going. Oh, I know why it's not looping. All right, well, when it's over, we'll just turn it off. All right, so you're gonna see that this is, pictures from the book and a couple others thrown in to sort of get you a feeling for the seasons, but we're gonna go from spring to summer to fall to winter, and you'll see the seasons pass with all the different Fruits and vegetables that are in season. That was a strawberry rhubarb sangria, which is very nice. So you'll see there's a lot. That's Portuguese sweetbread. There's all kinds of dishes, including pitcher drinks, because I think it's nice to have something sort of fresh and fruity and seasonal to go with your brunch. So while that's running, hopefully it will jog your memory. What comes to mind for you when we talk about like New England breakfasts or New England brunches? Like what sort of ingredients, what sort of dishes come to mind for you? You could just shout them out.
Eggs.
Eggs, yes.
French toast.
French toast, yes.
Corned beef hash.
Corned beef hash, 100%.
Pancakes.
Pancakes, yep. Those are the big ones, especially with maple syrup, right? Like maple syrup, such a New England topping for French toast, for pancakes. We've got muffins, we've got donuts, quiche, but they're all using, the ingredients that we're seeing: strawberry, rhubarb, black raspberries, red raspberries, cherries, peaches, the summer melons that we get, the corn, beans, squash, all the greens that we grow. And a lot of the dishes, all of the dishes, reflect the people that are here and the way that immigration has happened. If you were here for the New England Desserts talk, we talked a lot about immigration and how that affected the recipes that we have, how the Native American ingredients and techniques affected that, how the British settlement affected that. And it's the same thing for brunch. There's going to be a little bit of a repeat there, but there's also going to be some interesting differences because there's a lot more diversity, I guess, in the types of brunch dishes that we see from more different immigrant groups. So let's start with, what do I like about seasonal? Hi, come on in. About seasonal baking and seasonal cooking, or why is that important to New England? The flavors are very comforting, very nostalgic. Obviously, we grew up with them. They grow here. That's why we have them. Some of them are native. Some of them were brought here, and we'll talk about that. But it's great to buy local whenever you can. It's great to support your local farmers. The fruits and vegetables always taste better because they're fresher. They have to be more nutritious. I have not done any scientific studies, but they have to be more nutritious because they were just picked. They were in soil that is healthy, right? They were cared for. They were not trucked thousands and thousands of miles. And when produce is in season and it's bountiful, it's also less expensive. So all of that is a good reason to incorporate local seasonal foods into your life whenever possible. Supporting local farms is also really good for your local economy. It keeps dollars in the local food system. It helps also foster a sense of community. And I could tell by the way you guys were all talking with each other that you all know each other, that the library must be like a wonderful place for community here, because you all know each other and you all seem to like each other.
6:09 p.m.
So that's one of the reasons why I organized the chapters the way I did. So you can kind of tell when you go to the farmer's market, like what's there is what is available to you right now, and here are all the recipes that kind of go with that. So we have spring, summer, fall, winter, and then we have a Chinese dim sum chapter. So the Chinese are one of the largest immigrant groups in New England, and they have a lot to offer brunch. I'm just going to keep putting it all back on over and over again. A lot to offer us in terms of brunch. Dim sum means tea lunch in Chinese. Dim sum is a Cantonese, which is the southern part of China, brunch, essentially. It's always served with tea. It's usually savory. There are some sweet items. And if you've ever been into Boston's Chinatown or even some of the suburbs have like a really great dim sum, sometimes they roll carts around and you can sort of point out what you want to sample based on what it looks like. You might not always know what it is, but you're almost always guaranteed to like it. Sometimes they'll have you fill out a little form and then they'll bring it out to you. It really depends on the place. But it's such a fun cultural experience. When I was in college, like that was the place that the college kids would go on Sunday when they were like exhausted and wanted a really cheap, really delicious meal. So, you know, when I think about brunch, yes, we do have Irish breakfast that people enjoy. We do have like Turkish breakfast that people enjoy, but dim sum is really one that like a lot of people have had exposure to, and it really is part of, I think, the New England experience. So I asked some friends to contribute some recipes. I took a tour of Chinatown with a woman who just does a really wonderful, like brings you to these bakeries and you can sample all different things. If you're ever interested in doing that, I can give you that information. You know, looked at, you know, Chinese cookbooks. I had the opportunity to go to Taiwan when I was in high school to stay with my good friend's family for a couple of weeks, and so I sort of drew on some of that experience as well. So I hope that is a fun and interesting chapter that people can explore. Okay, so other things that I included were, you know, obviously dishes that we know have been invented or developed here in New England somewhere, right? Blueberry muffins. Jordan Marsh has a recipe that everybody loves. That is the recipe I included with a few very, very minor modifications because it is so beloved. Boston cream donuts. Those were a riff on the Boston cream pie that was made so famous at the Parker House Hotel in Boston. And then, of course, Dunkin' Donuts. But when you make them yourself, you won't believe how delicious they are. The donuts are incredible. And the jelly donuts, you don't have to make your own jam. You could buy a farmer's market jam, and that sort of makes it a little easier. Very delicious. So in addition to those kinds of things that are fairly common among all the New England states, there are some regionally specific brunch dishes that I thought were really interesting. These kids keep running out in and out of the door. Sorry, I get getting distracted. Buckwheat crepes, for example, are called, and I don't speak French, so forgive me if my pronunciation is wrong, but ploys, Ployes, Acadian buckwheat crepes. So the French Canadians that settled like in Maine and Nova Scotia and Cape Breton and all those areas to the north make a really a nice crepe using a special flour. And it's a little bit more rustic than like the Parisian crepes, but very sort of nutty with the buckwheat flour. You can use them for sweet or savory fillings. They're really nice, and I didn't even know about them, even having been born in Maine, because I was born in Kittery, which I've been told is barely Maine. So that was news to me. Rhode Island Johnny cakes. Have we heard of those before? They're like, if you haven't heard of them, they're like a cornmeal pancake, but they're not sweet, like if you've had cornmeal pancakes. They're a little more like fried grits, almost a little denser, a little more savory, although you can have them with syrup. And if you fry them just right so they're golden brown, they have like a Frito-like crunch on the outside. It's very delicious. So that's another one that I wanted to make sure that people outside of Rhode Island have access to that knowledge as well. And then things like Anadama bread from Rockport. Yeah?
We love it.
Do you love it?
Yeah.
So Anadama bread it has cornmeal in it, it has regular flour, and then, does it have rye? Now I'm forgetting. Usually a lot of breads, no rye? I have to look it up. Molasses it has. And
We all need that book.
I know, I wrote it like a year and a half ago, and so sometimes I forget. But yeah, there were a lot of, they called them thirded breads in colonial times because there wasn't enough wheat to make, the wheat didn't grow super well here, so the colonists would often mix corn, wheat, and rye together, like in a third of each, to make bread, so they'd cobble enough flour together. But Anadama bread.
Restaurant in Winton makes it.
Is that right? What's the restaurant?
The Cast Iron Cafe.
Ah, the Cast Iron Cafe.
Hole in the wall that is famous for its Anadama bread.
Oh.
Order it at Christmas, right, and they cut off the orders a certain day,
Yeah.
all of that. It is so good.
It is so good. It makes the
they
best
make-
toast too.
They
French toast. That's a great idea. I always. Yes, yes.
It's a restaurant.
I always learn something new at these things. Yeah. So, so those are the three that jump to mind, but there are plenty of others, and we'll probably talk about a few more. Maple syrup we talked about, native ingredient, native techniques, made maple syrup a commonplace sweetener that, it's still around even though it's very expensive. It was replaced by sugar because sugar was artificially cheap because it was made with forced labor. So, that's why we see a lot of molasses being used in colonial cooking, because it was part of the sugar processing, the sugar making process. Rum, molasses, white sugar. They kind of all went together, and it was all sort of part of the triangular slave trade and the way the colonial economies, the North and the South, were operating. We all know this. Cornmeal, sweet corn, flint corn. These were all very important to the Native Americans and their cooking, very important to the British when they came here, would not have survived without that knowledge. And then there were like the berries, the wild raspberries, the wild blueberries in Maine, cranberries in southern Massachusetts and the Cape. Nuts and seeds, all of those things, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, were used by the Native Americans and also by the settlers. The English words for pumpkins and squash did come from the Algonquin words. They were responsible for, what's the word, like, help me out, creating, you're crossing breeds, you're hybridizing different strains, cultivating. Is that the right word? Like developing the different breeds of corn, beans, squash, and other native ingredients. So, we think of Boston as Bean Town. Boston baked beans. Bostonians have been making beans for hundreds of years, but actually beans have been made by the Native Americans from even before that. They would create a hole in the ground, deep. They would line it with hot stones. They would put the beans in liquid in some type of vessel, and then cover it up. Maybe a little bear fat in there, maybe a little maple syrup, maybe not. Maybe some medicine, maybe not, and cook it overnight in a hole. And that's what they would call, the Penobscot called them actually beanhole beans because they were made in a hole. And that's very similar to, how the settlers, they long, slow baked the beans in an oven. They used molasses more often than maple syrup, and maybe some salt pork. So it's sort of a continuation of that tradition. And so we see a lot of that sort of Native American cooking coming through. We've got baked beans, we've got the New England clam bakes, like in the lobster bakes, same kind of thing. And finally, seafood. The Native Americans, would clam. They would fish. People have been fishing, like the waters off of New England from well before the settlers were here. The Basque fishermen, the Vikings, like a lot of people were fishing. And of course, we know that fishing was a major industry for hundreds of years, and still today. So I wanted to make sure to include, some fish dishes. We've got lobster Benedict. We've got lobster rolls. I did lobster sliders. What did I do? Cod cakes, lobster, potato and corn pot pie. So things like that incorporate some of the really nice fish from the seasons.
Did you bring a simple list?
I wish. And smoked bluefish, which is one of I know bluefish, like not everybody likes that fish because it's kind of an oilier fish, a little stronger flavor, but I love it. My husband will fish for it, and we will smoke it on our grill and then make pate out of it or put it on salads. It's really good. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Are we sick of seeing do we need the pictures? We'll skip the pictures. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, so some recipes and techniques that the British brought. So apples are not native to New England. A lot of people don't know that. They are very, very important to New England. They've been grown here for hundreds of years, but they didn't originate here. They originated in Kazakhstan, and they made their way sort of across Europe, and then the British brought them. They did very well here. Like, they seem to like our crazy winters, unlike some of the other crops that they brought. And in fact, and of course Johnny Appleseed was spreading seeds all over the country. They would hybridize. They would, birds would eat the fruit, drop the seeds. New varieties would spring up and cross. And so we do have some heirloom varieties here that are native to Massachusetts, like Roxbury Russet. There's one from Rhode Island called Rhode Island Greening. That's a really nice green baking apple. Baldwin. So there's a bunch of different apples that are sort of, they call them heirloom apples, that are still grown at orchards today. But they were not here before, before the British came. So it's kind of interesting to know that. They also brought pears, rhubarb, and quince. And so a lot of them were trying to replicate their cottage gardens at home, so they would have access to the fruits, make jams, make, desserts with them, puddings, cakes, what have you. And so, when I was talking about New England desserts, we talked a lot about some of the, pudding type desserts that the British, were known for, as well as like using scraps of things to make desserts, whether it's like an apple brown Betty with, buttered breadcrumbs, or just putting together some flour, butter, oats to make a topping for a crisp or a crumble, or making like a biscuit topping for cobbler, stuff like that. So the British really, brought a lot of their own, sweet and savory baking techniques with them. But, when they first got here, there was no wheat, there was no dairy, they didn't have their cows here, like there weren't cows here. There was the bison, but there weren't cows. The dairy industry started once the British brought cows here, and then, you had your butter and your cream and eggs, etc., from chickens. And then wheat, they did grow some of it, but it was not a crop that thrived here. So they would make do with cornmeal when they could, and other grains as well. So that's why you see a lot of cornmeal-based desserts. You see a lot of cornbread, not grits, Indian pudding, for example, another dessert that is common in New England, and one of my personal favorites. And so pumpkin pie would not have been in a crust originally, because there was no wheat. It was most likely probably in a gourd, a hollowed out gourd, or maybe it was just more like a custard style thing. But yes, the British brought their pudding and cake techniques. They did some baking. They have their own style of muffins, which are crumpets, which we call English muffins. That was sort of, the American take on the crumpet is the English muffin. And if you've never made English muffins from scratch, I would highly recommend it. I never thought you could have anything better than a Thomas's English muffin. Like for me, like the nooks and crannies, like for me, it's just a vessel for butter. But if you make it yourself, you will be amazed. And it's interesting because you actually do it on a pan, like you're actually searing it on like a skillet or a pan. So it's a little bit different, like a griddle essentially. Brown bread is like steamed brown bread is a favorite of mine, and it was also served with the baked beans on a weekend. Yep. I don't know these days if the next generation is willing to steam bread in a can for hours, especially when you can buy it at the supermarket. I think B&M still has the cans you can buy with raisins and without. Yeah. So I actually tried to make a muffin out of it. It's not steamed, it's baked. And it's not as heavy and it's not as dense, but it has that same flavor. And my kids were willing to eat it, so that was a good sign. And then the other thing that has a British, that we definitely can trace back to British history is the popover, which is basically like, yes, Yorkshire pudding. And I'm not sure that they were ever eaten as brunch, like officially, but I figure that probably there were leftovers some evening. And, if there's ever like leftover pie, that becomes dessert. So why wouldn't the leftover popovers become breakfast? So
Isn't it the same ingredients for a popover as it is for Yorkshire pudding?
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing.
Right.
I created a sweet popover. It's just like dusted in cinnamon sugar, like a cider donut, and then I filled it with ricotta, like a cannoli. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to put that in there. But it's very delicious, and they're very simple. Depending on, sometimes they will collapse depending on the type of pan you have, depending on if a butterfly is flapping its wings in China or something. You never really know why sometimes. But either way, they're delicious. And just plenty of butter, plenty of cinnamon sugar. It's all good. All right, so now we're getting to the influences of other immigrant groups. And we talked about quiche, and we talked about French toast. So those obviously were the French influences. Crepes, the ploys that we were talking about. The French Canadians were a huge population here in the early days. And so there was a lot of, of that French influence in New England as well, especially in the northern, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, those areas. Other things, donuts. So donuts, the donuts that we see with the hole in the middle and all the frostings and all the crazy colors, those are definitely American. But a lot of Europeans of all different stripes would make fried dough. The Dutch, the Germans, the Italians have zeppoli. There's like a lot of people brought them. So it's like impossible to know exactly who. But there were a large number of Dutch immigrants in New York. And they would make these oily cakes. There seems to be a lot of written history that shows that it possibly could have originated in New York, but also in New England, like there's the same groups of people coming and making the same sorts of things. So it's hard to pin it down. But what I did keep finding in my research was stories about how the donut got its hole, which to me was almost more funny than the other origins, because like if you go on the internet or Wikipedia or any place where you look at the lore and you have to like fact check it, but all of them would have like this main sea captain in the story who was given the credit for giving donuts their holes. So what happened was he had a crew. He was coming out of, I forget which port in Maine. His mother would cook for his crew, make donuts, but no holes, just a big blob of dough. She would put in there spices, because he was, member of the spice trade, lemon zest, because that would help with scurvy. And then she would quickly fry up these like really heavy dough cakes and send them on their way. And what the captain found was that like it was a little heavy, like the frying was a little heavy for his digestive system, like some of the dough in the center wasn't like fully cooked, and so he would take the cap of his pepper tin and just punch out the hole. And then he would store the donut with the hole punched out on his captain's wheel, and every picture is like this stormy weather, and he's like trying to like drive through the storm with his donut on like the spikes of his wheel. I don't know what you call the captain's wheel, but I just kept coming up, I kept seeing that picture over and over again, and I was like, I just love this story. Most likely the hole is not there because sometimes it wouldn't cook through, but if you don't have a hole when you put it in the oil, it cooks evenly throughout. So I suspect that's why, but who knows? There's a much better story the other way around. The Portuguese were another really important immigrant group, especially like in the coastal areas. They were whalers, they were fishermen on Cape Cod, Fall River, all these areas, Mystic, a large Portuguese population. They have wonderful breads. Sweet rolls are one thing that I love to make. And when I made the lobster sliders, I decided instead of using like hot dog buns, which you can totally use, that's traditional and standard. But the Portuguese sweet rolls are just sweet enough. Like they're not so sweet that they're like a donut. They're just a little bit sweet, and a lot of bread and hot dog rolls has sugar in it. I don't know if you noticed, but like it's hard to find bread at the store that doesn't have sugar in it. So it's not that big of a step. And actually Portuguese sweet rolls make amazing lobster sliders. So now you know. The Portuguese also contributed a bunch of soups that are delicious, like the Portuguese kale soup that everybody makes in New England with the kidney beans or the white beans and the collard greens or the kale or Swiss chard or what have you. Fisherman's stew, like there's like a lot of wonderful Portuguese recipes. Of course, bagels were brought by the German and Russian immigrants. There was documentation of like Warsaw, Poland being like the origin of bagels. So they were brought over in like the early 1900s. And then it's actually the New Haven company, Lenders, that was credited with popularizing the bagel. I assume at one point way in the past they were delicious bagels. I don't think they're delicious now, but they were the first bagel to be frozen and shipped all over the country. And so it allowed people like in the western part of the country, in the central part of the country, who had never met a Jewish person in their lives, to kind of know what a bagel was and kind of know what it tasted like. And so then there was demand for it, and then more bagels were being made, and so like that. So, you know, if you're a bagel lover, you probably know New York bagels are considered the best. Montreal bagels are considered the best. New England bagels are not considered the best. But you can make delicious bagels at home, and there is one claim to fame in terms of New England and bagels, and that is the much maligned cinnamon raisin bagel, which was invented in New England. There's some speculation about who it was. Some say it was a baker in Brookline. The name I have to write down because I can never remember it. Eagerman, Mo Eagerman. But there's also some thought that some people say it was Lenders, anyways. But the point is it was here in New England. And, you know, I assume it's because of the like cinnamon toast vibes that you get. I mean, I personally love cinnamon raisin bagels, but, you know, I've been told any self-respecting Jew would never eat a cinnamon raisin bagel. So I made sure to put that in a separate part of the book, away from the traditional, you know, sesame and pumpernickel and just plain water bagels. So. But thank goodness for bagels, because I basically subsisted on those in the morning in high school, like every day, because you could buy pretty good ones like in the grocery stores around Boston. And that was because Mo Eagerman supplied Stop and Shop chain and Star Markets at that time as well. So, and finally, Chinese dim sum. We talked about how that is just a great, interesting cultural experience. Some of the examples of recipes that we have are pork and cabbage dumplings. Shumai. Does anybody know what shumai are? They're like little dumplings open at the top. It's like a cup, and then inside is shrimp, mushroom, and pork. And then they're usually topped with like maybe some carrot or peas or whatnot, and they're steamed in a steamer basket like that. They're very delicious. Scallion pancakes, egg custard tarts are another thing to try off of dim sum. They are very similar to the Portuguese pastéis de nata. It's like basically an egg custard in like a puff pastry shell or like a sweet crust. And in fact, that's because the Portuguese did a lot of trading with the area of China that it hailed from. So it's very, very interesting how people mix and the food mixes and you can sort of tell a story. All right, so I've talked for quite a while. And there were just a few things I wanted to mention that I thought were interesting, because I know one of you mentioned corned beef hash. So I wanted to make note of corned beef hash as being like, a great use for leftovers from an Irish boiled dinner. Like, that's definitely kind of an Irish thing, but there's also red flannel hash. And yes, beets. So the story that I kept coming across when I was researching red flannel hash is that lumberjacks and hunters and trappers and outdoorsmen that would spend like a lot of time in the northern woods would need something like hearty and delicious and nutritious to sort of keep them going that you could make over the campfire. And so this was one example of something that they could make with just root veggies that kept. And I think I read somewhere that if they didn't have meat, they would use beets as the meat substitute. Maybe visually it kind of gave them like, oh, there's some red meat in there. I don't know. But more likely it was probably there was meat and there were all these vegetables. And it doesn't have to be just potatoes. It can be carrots, turnips, parsnips, beets. It's all really delicious. And I made a nice horseradish sour cream that you can have on top. That's really good. So the Johnny cakes and the pancakes. So I love blueberry pancakes. Please don't leave without taking this recipe card for blueberry buttermilk pancakes, because I think blueberries are still in season. And if you can get your hands on the little Maine wild blueberries, those are for sure the best. What did you say?
Those are the only ones.
Those are the only ones.
Actually deliver them from an organic farm up in Maine called Burke's Farm.
Is that
And
right?
they deliver them once a month.
Where?
A 5-pound frozen box of them for $35. And you pick them up at the Rockland Park and Ride.
How nice.
They're delicious.
Well, you can get the Lyman's frozen.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually used to work in the Lyman's factory.
Did you?
Yeah, I used to pick bear poop out of the blueberries.
You still?
Really?
I don't do
Wow.
yeah.
TMI.
Burke's Farm is really, really good.
That is a great tip. Yeah. So sign up for your blueberries. Amazing. So the Native Americans also would make corn cakes as well. I think we talked about the Johnny cakes. But apparently, I didn't know this. There were pancake breakfasts were a thing in England, and among Christians especially. And during Shrovetide, which is the period right before Lent, they would try to use up all their eggs and dairy before Lent, so that, it wouldn't be tempted or they wouldn't go bad. And so that was sort of what the tradition was, to have all these pancake breakfasts before Lent. So I don't know if they probably continued that here. And then the name was Journey Cakes originally, because they were portable, something to eat, and because of our vernacular, our regional accent, dropping the R, it became Johnny Cakes. So instead of Journey Cakes, Johnny Cakes. Yeah. There's one more I wanted to talk about, which is the New England cornmeal custard cake, which is also known as the spider cake. Has anybody heard of this?
Oh, but it sounds delicious.
No spiders were harmed in the making of that cake. So what it is basically, I'm going to see if I can find the picture. Why is it not? Okay. Well, I guess we didn't index it by spider cake, which is probably wise, because nobody's going to look for it that way. Oh, there it is, 162. Okay, so it looks like cornbread, and it kind of tastes like, it essentially is cornbread. It looks like that. But you can see there's like a creamy layer in the middle, ideally. It doesn't always separate perfectly, but it's always in there. And you serve it out of your cast iron skillet with plenty of maple syrup, and if you want extra cream, you can pour some cream on top. So how did it get its name? So back in olden times, the big sort of cast iron Dutch ovens would have 3 legs, and they were called a spider. Yeah, and so you might have seen them, like people cook over like a campfire with it, because it has a lid and you can put the coals on top, and it also sits on top of the coals, so you have heat from all sides essentially. But yeah, it was called a spider, and so that's the only reason why they called it that. So when I read it, and I had no idea, I actually own one of those, and I didn't know that's what it was called. I thought it was very funny. But yeah, the cake is essentially a cornmeal cake, and the way that you make it, it's basically one bowl, mix everything together, pour the batter into, a preheated cast iron skillet, and then you take a cup of cream and you just pour it into the center, and you don't mix it. And so, bless you. And then you carefully put it into bake, and somehow, it just kind of settles right there and kind of creates that little custardy center. But even if it doesn't, it tastes amazing with maple syrup, and it's like the easiest thing you could ever make for brunch. So I do mention that because it's a crowd pleaser, it's easy, it's cheap aside from the maple syrup, so it's something you want to know. All right, I'm going to stop there because I want to make sure that there is time for questions, and you guys can, ask me what you want, and we can discuss your favorite brunch recipes.
What is your favorite brunch?
Oh my God, there are so many things. So I love blueberry pancakes, as I mentioned, and I love sourdough waffles. So I am really bad about maintaining a sourdough starter. I keep it in my refrigerator and don't feed it for a year, and then I try to build it up again, and I'll make 2 loaves of bread, and then it will sit for a while. But I always have sourdough discard, and so waffles are a great way that you can take that extra that you don't use, even if it's been sitting for a while, maybe not a year, but but no matter how disgusting your sourdough discard smells, your sourdough waffles will be amazing. Believe me, I have put very old sourdough starter in them. They're always amazing. So that's something I love. I love donuts. I love donuts, especially jelly donuts. I have these little pastries in the summer section that have cherries in them. I use puff pastry. You can make your own puff pastry, or you can just buy the all butter puff pastry. I think Dufour is the brand that has the really, really good puff pastry, and it's just cherries, a little almond extract to boost that, and a little glaze, and it's like cherry pie. It's delicious. I think of brunch as mostly in the spring and summer, but the fall has so many great things with apples and pumpkins. So the maple walnut cinnamon rolls with like the cream cheese frosting and some cardamom in there, those are one of my favorites. The caramel apple sticky buns are one of my favorites.
Time you serve this?
I'll be sending invitations soon. And I just love the pitcher drinks. I make like the spiced pear sangria. There's a peach berry sangria, strawberry rhubarb sangria. There's a pumpkin cider that, if anybody's been to, I don't know if this is the right crowd for this, Universal Studios, the Harry Potter world, yeah. Anybody try the pumpkin juice? Most people go straight for the butterbeer, which I also did. But their pumpkin juice at Universal is delicious, and that was like my basis for the pumpkin cider recipe, and it's pretty close. The focaccia is amazing. I mean, basically, I'm really easy to please. I want it to be like not too sweet. I don't want to feel like I need to take a nap for the rest of my Sunday. I mean, I love napping. But like I said, I wake up very late anyway, so I'm not ready to nap immediately. And I like it to not just be all carbs. I like for there to be some freshness to it. So like the lobster Benedict, hi. I included, this is not traditional, well, lobster isn't traditional, so there's that. And a big slice of like heirloom tomato and lots of fresh herbs to keep it nice and bright and fresh tasting. Come on in. And like just lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. That is my goal for brunch. Yeah. Yeah.
I love rhubarb.
Yes.
I miss it the season. Every year after year, I miss the season. So when the season's passed, is there anywhere you can get rhubarb? Is anybody?
You can still get rhubarb this time of year, depending on, like, I have 2 rhubarb plants. They're just very sad at this time of year. People freeze it. If you have a friend that grows it, they probably have some in their freezer they'd be willing to give you. Where could you find it? I don't ever see it like sold frozen, which is too bad because.
I think I've seen it.
No?
But I don't know where.
Oh, you have?
Yeah,
Oh.
Maybe Trader Joe's.
Maybe Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's. Try Trader Joe's.
Frozen rhubarb?
Maybe.
Yeah. I think
There's been a sighting somewhere, but we're just not sure where. Yes.
I haven't Googled it yet. I'm sure
Yeah.
it's out there somewhere, but yeah.
There are a lot of farmers markets
Yes. Yes.
around the
Season, so I
Yeah.
feel like
It's all gone.
it's
No,
still
like you
Yeah.
but it was just such a short period.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel you. I love rhubarb, that's why I grow it. I'm a terrible gardener, but I will grow rhubarb because it doesn't need me. Yeah, it's worth it. It is totally worth it. And if it can survive me, the kind that I grow is the Canadian red variety, and it's pretty hardy for the cold here. So, you're welcome. Are you freezing? It's cold in here, isn't it?
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
I love reading your books.
Oh, thank
I
you.
love the New England desserts, and it's fun to just pick up and read.
Aw.
I've made a whole bunch of the recipes, and they're really easy to follow.
Good.
And I really love a lot of them. So, but do you also take the pictures?
Yes.
I think you did for the first one. Do you do that? Okay, I'm sorry.
I did.
I said that. Go, you're on.
Yes, I did the photography for this book and that book. My first book, Winter Sweet, I did not. I did not have the confidence. I did not have the I was afraid. I was too afraid. And then I got to watch the whole process being done for my first cookbook, which the photo shoot took place in Philadelphia. I took a train in a blizzard down to Philadelphia, and Steve Legato was my photographer. He had this beautiful sunlit space right down the street from the what's the market, the Faneuil Hall type market. Anyway. Reading Terminal Market, yes. Right down the street from there. So I would go get my pork sandwiches from Denick's anyway. And so they flew in a food stylist from Hollywood. There was a prop stylist, like a separate prop stylist, who brought a van full of plates and napkins and linens and all kinds of things. And she was just responsible for that aspect. There was an art director. There were the chefs that were making the food. I didn't have to do anything. I just sat there and I was taking notes. Oh, this is how it's done. And I mean, it was a major production, and it was beautiful. But because of the expense of the whole production, there was only 10, it feels like there's only 10 pictures in the whole book. They couldn't do pictures for every recipe. So that was one benefit of me doing it myself. But there were other reasons why. But yeah, I'm very proud of the way that came out because it does not come naturally to me at all. The writing and the recipes, that does, the writing does, the recipes, that took more time. But the food styling, there's a very fine line between having something look really messy and disgusting and there's fake, too perfect. It doesn't look like food, and then there's slop and you don't want to eat it, and then there's all of this space, and it's well, how do you make the crumbs just so you want to take a bite? I can't for every one photo you see, there's 100 photos that I took to try to get that really nice look. So
You have to make the person feel, I could do that. And if it's too perfect,
that's a good point. That is a very good point. Why we don't want to make it too perfect. We don't want to intimidate our readers. That's why they don't look perfect.
where did the idea of coffee cakes come from? All over. And when I think of brunch, it's all bring a coffee cake.
Yeah,
We've
that's a
had them
great question.
forever, but I'm just curious.
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know that the British had their tea cakes, but the coffee cake is not the same, and it's a specific thing. I kind of think about New York when I think of coffee cakes, but I don't know why, and I don't know if that's even right. Does anybody have any knowledge about that?
Great question.
Yeah, no, I'll have to do some
Well, we'll all
German.
research this and meet again.
Very, very possible. Very possible. The Germans have such a sweet tooth, and they do a lot.
That was one that we all learned how to make, but
Yes.
sour cream coffee cake, that's
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to, it's food for thought.
Well, there's 2 credits for Betsy.
Okay. You can have a book on all coffee cakes. And we'll all come back.
Okay.
That was kind of what I was going to ask her. So you mentioned that you work at Formaggio's Kitchen.
Yes.
So have you been there a while, or?
No, I just started. I feel like an apprentice. I feel like I shouldn't call myself a cheesemonger yet. I should call myself an apprentice
So is this
cheesemonger.
influencing like recipes you're working on or thinking of in a cookbook?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've always been interested in cheese, and in fact, my first book, Winter Sweet, had a whole chapter on cheese, and there was a cheese plate section with pairings, and I talked to the former owners. Kurt Gerdahl used to own Formaggio, and then his son was like working there, and I worked with him, and he came up with the pairings. So I've always loved cheese. So the reason that I'm working there is because I wanted to learn more about it, and I assumed that I wouldn't get the job because I didn't know enough about cheese. But they said it's very hard to find people who know a lot about cheese. So a lot of it is training on the job, and so that's great. I'm happy to learn on the job. And the other reason was that I was spending too much time alone in my house. And I wanted to get out and be with people, because writing can be very isolating. And after having written, these 2 books in a row, I was like, I need to get out more. I need to have more interaction coming in. I want to talk to other people that like food, and it's been really great in that way. And it's also, the store is just such a nice community feel. It's in the South End. It's very kind of neighborhoody, and there's regulars, and it's just fun to be in an adorable, it's tiny, adorable store filled with food and people coming in and asking food questions. And I am learning a lot about cheese and tasting a lot of cheese. So
What's the name of it?
Formaggio Kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
There's the main stores in Cambridge, then there's one in the South End, there's one in Kendall that's new, and I think there's one in New York now too.
What street in South End?
It's Shawmut Ave. Yeah. So if you're in town, I usually work Sundays and Fridays, and then some other day during the week. Yeah.
Since you're taking your own pictures, which you do a fantastic job with,
Thank you.
how many times do you average making a recipe to get your pictures right? Is it
Yeah.
you make it once and you take all your pictures and you pick from there, or
Yeah.
you sometimes have to make the recipe again because you're
Oh,
not
yeah.
happy?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. There's always so the average time I would make a recipe, I mean, it really depends, but I would say 3 or 4 on average. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes it's a recipe I've been making for a long time. I know it's fine. Just send it to the tester and make sure that other people can duplicate it. But sometimes I make things 10 times, and I'm like, okay, maybe this one isn't going to make it into the book, or I'll try something a little different. The photography, sometimes I'll start shooting it, because I'm making so many attempts at it, I have a lot of opportunities to take photos. So the photo you see, for example, this one was the good one, but I might have taken a picture of the bad one because that picture came out good. It looked pretty. Didn't taste good, but it looked really pretty. And nobody has to know. So that has happened. Yeah, so maybe the recipe comes out really good. I take pictures, don't really like the way the pictures come out, so I'll have to make it again. And I just, with every opportunity that you make a recipe is another opportunity to take the photo, if that makes sense. I don't think I explained that well, but I think you know where I'm going. Yes.
Are you working on another book?
I am working on another book, but it's not a cookbook. Oh, no, I'm not. It's not cheese. You know, people have been asking me, like, are you going to write about cheese next? And I say no, because I did not go into this job saying I was going to write anything about cheese. So I wouldn't want them to think I'm spying on, do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't go into it with like, I want to write a book about cheese and now I'm going to go infiltrate this cheese shop. No, I wanted to learn about cheese. Maybe someday I'll feel like I've learned enough to write a book about cheese, but more than likely it will just be an anecdote, or or maybe I'll end up working there for years and years. I don't know, but I don't. The book I'm writing now is kind of memoirish. I turned 50 a few years back, and I feel like, that's a good time to sort of reflect back on your life and your career and what you've done and what you've learned and what you can share. And I have a lot of sort of funny baking stories, so it's mostly that, like how you make a career, how you learn from your mistakes, how you become a person, like that. But you never know what will sell and what. So, anyways, but I am working on it.
Include some recipes that didn't make it into, but are still delicious.
Most likely there will be recipes at the end, because a lot of, I don't know I read a lot of food memoirs, like Olive Ruth Reichel's books, and a lot of times it's chapter recipe, but I don't like the way the recipes break up the narrative, so I would probably have the recipes at the end. But yes, so that you would know what I was talking about if I was referencing a specific family recipe or something. But
You said when you make the recipe, then you send it to the tester.
yes.
How does that work?
Yeah. So I don't think most people do this, or maybe some people do this, but I want to make sure that other people can duplicate the recipes. So I have friends and neighbors and like former blog readers, people that I can call on to say, hey, can you just make this recipe for your family and see if you have any issues with it? I've also used my son's friends, like kids, like high schoolers, middle schoolers, like anybody really should be able to do most of this stuff. And so I send it out and I just have them fill out a quick questionnaire. Would you make this again? Was there anything confusing? Pretty much every time I send out a questionnaire, somebody finds something that's confusing that I wouldn't have thought of. So it really does help to make the recipe writing better. And then sometimes people just have different opinions and they don't like a specific recipe. And if I send it to another person and they don't like it either, well, that's not going in the cookbook. Like 2 strikes, I'm out, right? But I find it really helpful. And luckily I have a lot of people who are willing to do it. So yeah, it's a lot of work though. It's a lot of like organizing.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, but it's good. It makes the book better.
Does, back to Formaggio's, do they publish things you can do with their cheeses? So you could take over that?
So,
They have a great website that talks about cheese pairings, wine pairings. But the people that work there know so much more than me. Like
You created your quiche with the brie.
oh yeah.
Recipe for them.
Yeah, I know. I'm playing the slow game. I have some ideas. Sometimes they have produce lying around that is not it's past its prime, right? It hasn't sold, and I'm like, I want to make a pie out of that and serve it and have it like be something that people can take out. But they already have a bakery at Cambridge, so just see what emerges. But I like that you're all in my corner trying to help me find my niche. Anything else?
And that was wonderful.
Thank you. It's exactly 7 o'clock. Thank you.